Welcome to the Deep Dive, the place where we take a stack of sources, articles, and research, and we try to extract the essential knowledge that you need, complete with all the surprising facts and, the illuminating context.
Today, we are undertaking a deep dive into the state of Arkansas, often called the natural state. And our sources, they give us a really comprehensive look at its complex identity. It's a place rooted in some pretty unique geography, a very turbulent history, and an economy that's, was anchored by these global corporate giants.
And our mission for you, the curious learner, is to quickly move beyond the stereotypes. We want to uncover the key pivot points that really define Arkansas today. We're going to extract everything.
Everything.
From the geographical fault lines that literally split the state to the pivotal civil rights battles, right up to its modern status as the global headquarters for one of the world's largest companies.
And this history is just full of these profound paradoxes. I think we should start with maybe the most foundational identity crisis of all.
Which is?
The name itself.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately because it's a source of instant confusion for visitors. Everyone asks this. Why do we say Arkansas and not, Arkansas? What specific history forced the state to legislate its own pronunciation?
It's a brilliant example of how indigenous roots and colonial languages just sort of collide. The name Arkansas is a direct descendant of the French term Arkansas.
Arkansas, with an S at the end.
Right. And the French used this term as a plural for their transliteration of an Algonquian term, Akansa.
So the origin is rooted in the people who actually lived there first. What is that Algonquian term, Akansa? What does it actually mean?
It's widely believed to translate to South Wind people. This was the term that was applied to the Quapaw people. They were a Digia Siouan-speaking group that had settled in the region way back around the 13th century.
Okay, and it's important to note the connection here, right? Because the related term Kansa is the root word for the state of Kansas.
That's the one. And that makes the confusion completely understandable.
So the whole difference in pronunciation exists purely because of the French. Because the French often don't pronounce the final is in a word. They said, Arkansas?
Something like that.
Yeah.
But when American settlers saw the written word Arkansas with an S on the end, they just naturally assumed they should pronounce it.
Just like they did with the neighboring state of Kansas.
Exactly. So you had generations of American settlers arriving who were, totally unfamiliar with the original French or Algonquian phonetics, and they insisted on sounding that S. This tension between the two pronunciations, Arkansas versus Arkansas, it just built up for decades.
Until it actually boiled over into state politics in 1881. That sounds like a fascinating legislative fight.
It really was. It was a conflict that was rooted in regional identity. The disagreement became so fierce between two particular state senators that the matter had to be officially settled.
By the entire state legislature.
The whole legislature. They felt the state couldn't really move forward with a unified identity if its own elected officials couldn't even agree on how to say its name.
So what was the binding resolution that came out of this high-stakes grammar battle?
The resulting legislation, which is now codified as Arkansas Code 1-4105,
right,
was, it's incredibly specific.
Oh, really?
It decreed that the only true pronunciation is the one that was received by the French from the native Indians. They mandated it must be pronounced in 3 syllables, Arkansas.
With the final S absolutely silent.
Absolutely silent. I love the level of detail, though. They didn't just tell you how to say it. They gave phonetic rules.
Okay, like what?
They specified that the A in each syllable should have the Italian sound, and that the accent should be placed on the first and the last syllables.
Wow.
And what's more, the alternative pronunciation, the one that sounds the final is like Kansas, was explicitly declared an innovation to be discouraged.
An innovation to be discouraged. I love that.
It was a very firm rejection of that growing phonetic trend.
That legislative text is just a brilliant snapshot of a state fighting to maintain its historical and cultural roots against linguistic drift. And for those interested in the real minutia, we should probably note the 2007 non-binding resolution that clarified the official possessive form.
Oh, yes. It's Arkansas.
Arkansas. Even though that was a silent, you still use the apostrophes for possession.
It's a state whose identity is just wrapped up in this historical and linguistic complexity right from the very start. So, let's quickly situate Arkansas. It was admitted to the Union as the 25th state on June 15, 1836.
And its nicknames, they tell a story of an evolving identity, don't they? Its current and I think most popular nickname is the natural state, which speaks to its geography.
Right.
But its former nickname was the more aspirational land of opportunity.
And its motto reinforces that idea of popular sovereignty.
Yeah.
Regnat populis, which is Latin for the people rule.
The capital and largest city, Little Rock, is centrally located, and it has a significant border span connecting with 6 neighboring states: Missouri, Tennessee, Mississippi, Louisiana, Texas, and Oklahoma. That really positions it squarely in the west-south-central region of the U.S. Now we jump into the geography, and this is so critical because the physical landscape of Arkansas is what dictated its history, its economy, and its political divide. You've characterized the state as fundamentally split into 2 halves.
That's right. Geographically, Arkansas is just defined by this massive difference between the highlands in the northwest and the lowlands in the southeast. This is the distinction that defined everything.
Everything.
I mean, from who owned slaves to who voted Republican for nearly a century and a half.
Okay, let's start with the highlands in the northwest. This is the rugged, very densely forested region.
These highlands are part of the U.S. interior highlands, which is a crucial geological area. It is, in fact, the only major mountainous region located between that vast stretch of the Appalachian Mountains in the east.
And the Rocky Mountains way out to the west.
Exactly. It's a really unique feature of the American interior.
And this mountainous region is split into 2 distinct ranges, is that correct?
Yes, you have the Ozark Mountains to the north, which are known for their rugged beauty and these deep-cut valleys. And then south of the Arkansas River Valley, you have the Ouachita Mountains.
And this kind of terrain, historically, it just wasn't conducive to large-scale plantation agriculture.
Not at all. This was the land of subsistence farming and, very limited cash crops. A whole different world.
Now let's contrast that rugged landscape with the lowlands that dominate the southern and eastern parts of the state.
The lowlands are dominated by 2 massive alluvial formations. You got the Gulf Coastal Plain stretching along the border with Louisiana, and then the extremely flat Mississippi alluvial plain.
Which is commonly known as the Arkansas Delta.
The Arkansas Delta.
Mm-hmm.
This delta region is characterized by this unbelievably rich alluvial soil, which was deposited over millennia by the Mississippi River's repeated flooding cycles.
And that richness in the soil made the Delta the perfect cradle for the cotton economy.
Precisely. The lowlands were ideal for large-scale, intensely labor-demanding commodity crops like cotton. And that made it the area where the slave-based plantation economy flourished and where wealth and political power were concentrated before the Civil War. So if you just mentally split this state diagonally, you are separating 2 completely different economic and social realities.
What's fascinating is that this flat delta region is interrupted by a truly strange geological feature. You have to tell us about Crowley's Ridge.
Crowley's Ridge is it's a true anomaly. It's a narrow band of rolling hills, and they rise unexpectedly between 250 to 500 feet above the surrounding pancake flat alluvial plain. It essentially bisects the entire delta region.
How did something like that even form in the middle of a floodplain?
Well, geologists believe it remained relatively elevated while the ancient Mississippi and Ohio rivers eroded the land on either side of it. So it essentially acts as this narrow, low-level mountain range right in the middle of a wetland. It's ecologically significant because it harbors different species of trees, like the only native tulip trees in the entire state.
Mm-hmm.
And historically, it offered the only easily defensible dry ground for settlement in the delta.
So let's look at the extremes in elevation now.
Okay, the highest point is Mount Magazine. That's in the Ouachita Mountains, and it reaches 2,753 feet.
And the lowest point.
In stark contrast, it's merely 56 feet above sea level, and that's located where the Ouachita River flows down into Louisiana. That nearly 2,700-foot difference is really the geographical summary of Arkansas in a nutshell.
And before we leave the terrain, we have to address this unique potential for literally finding riches in the earth. The state is the only place in the world where this specific activity is possible for the public.
That would be the Crater of Diamonds State Park near Murfreesboro. It's an internationally famous site because it is the world's only diamond-bearing site that is open to the public for digging and prospecting.
And the best part is,
anything you find, you get to keep, regardless of size or quality.
that is incredible. But does managing this unique resource present any challenges? I mean, has the state faced any criticism or ecological challenges managing public mining of its own resources?
That's a great question. The state manages it primarily as a recreational facility, and, a tourism boost, not an industrial mine.
So it's not like a big mining operation.
Not at all.
Yeah.
While they ensure safety and accessibility, the park is actually the eroded surface of a volcanic lamprite pipe.
Hmm.
Constant plowing and preparation of the field, turning the topsoil over for prospectors. That's part of the maintenance, not some deep-level excavation. Its primary function is tourism, which really reinforces that natural state identity through recreation.
Shifting to hydrology, the source material emphasizes how important the river systems are, not just for the ecology, but for large-scale commerce.
The Mississippi River is the eastern boundary, of course. But the true commercial story lies with its major tributaries. The Arkansas River, the White River, and the St. Francis River. All of these flow southeast into the Mississippi.
And the Arkansas River itself is the backbone of a major piece of federal infrastructure. This is something that's often overlooked nationally, but it's vital for inland commerce.
You're talking about the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River Navigation System.
Hmm.
This is a monumental federal project maintained by the Army Corps of Engineers that basically tamed the historically unpredictable and often non-navigable Arkansas River.
So how does that system work, and what is its scope?
It's a massive network of locks and dams that effectively turns the Arkansas River into a Class I commercial waterway.
So big barges can use it.
Heavy barge traffic. It allows them to move efficiently, providing navigable access not just within Arkansas, but all the way upriver to the port of Catoosa in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Wow, all the way to Tulsa.
It essentially links the heart of the American interior directly to the Gulf of Mexico via the Mississippi River, which supports freight mobility and industrial output across 3 states. It's a huge deal.
The state also relies heavily on engineered water bodies for tourism since it features very few natural lakes.
Precisely. The reservoirs, like Bull Shoals Lake, Lake Wachita, and Greer's Ferry Lake, they were all created through dam construction. And these have become these massive hubs for recreation and tourism, fundamentally altering the economies of the surrounding counties. Lake Wachita is particularly famous for its clarity and its size.
But the state also preserved one major waterway in its pristine form.
Yes, the Buffalo National River holds the distinction of being preserved in its natural, undammed state. It offers protected wilderness and float trips, which is a major draw for the state's outdoor tourism sector. And the river and its tailwaters, especially the Norfolk Tailwater and the White River, have become these premier cold water trout fishing destinations.
Okay, let's discuss the climate and the context of that natural state identity. We're in a humid subtropical zone.
That means long, hot, humid summers. Little Rock averages a July high of 93 degrees Fahrenheit. And annual precipitation is high, ranging from 40 to 60 inches across the state, which ensures that the forest lands remain dense and green. The winters are generally mild to cool, though the northern regions do see more snow than the delta.
And the high precipitation and warm temperatures create conditions for extreme weather. Arkansas is in a vulnerable zone.
It is extremely vulnerable. Arkansas sits in what's known as Dixie Alley, which overlaps with the western edge of Tornado Alley.
So a double threat.
A double threat. It means the state is highly prone to severe weather, frequent thunderstorms, hail, and tornadoes, particularly in the spring. And whilst far inland, the state also receives the remnants of tropical systems moving north from the Gulf, which often cause massive short-duration rainfall and severe flash flooding.
Let's examine the resources that contribute to that natural state name, starting with the sheer amount of forest cover.
It's huge. 56% of Arkansas's land, which is nearly 19 million acres, is covered by forest. The dominant species include oak, hickory, and various pines, notably the shortleaf and loblolly pines.
And that leads to a major industry.
The massive density of this pine belt, especially in the southwestern part of the state, supports a very strong and established lumbering and paper milling industry, which remains a key component of the state's manufacturing sector.
What about the Earth's mineral resources? What's under the ground?
Well, historically, bauxite was a massive contributor to the state economy, primarily mined around Saline County. Bauxite is the essential ore used for aluminum production.
Right.
And while that mining has slowed significantly, the state still produces vanadium, which is used to strengthen steel. Furthermore, the state is a significant producer of commodity outputs like natural gas, oil, and crushed stone.
So this geographical complexity, this deep split between the highlands and the fertile lowlands, underpinned by these massive engineered waterways and rich mineral resources, it perfectly sets the stage for a dramatic and often conflict-ridden history.
Well, the human history of Arkansas stretches back thousands of years, long before any European arrival. The region was home to major indigenous nations, including the Caddo, the Osage, and the Quapaw, who shaped the landscape for millennia.
The first European contact was Spanish, and the sources make it very clear that it was a brief but brutal period. Tell us about Hernando de Soto's expedition.
De Soto crossed the Mississippi River and entered Arkansas around 1541, maybe 1542. He was searching for gold and riches, but he found none. Instead, his expedition encountered constant resistance from the native populations, including the Quapaw, and they struggled with disease and dwindling supplies as they marched across central Arkansas and the Ozark Mountains.
The description of De Soto's end is particularly grim. I mean, it reads like a cynical attempt to control his narrative even after he died.
It is a truly dark moment in colonial history. Before De Soto died, likely from a fever near what is modern-day MacArthur, he became very paranoid. He feared that if the native groups discovered he was mortal, his already weakened army would be wiped out. So to prevent this, he ordered his men to execute a horrific act.
What was the nature of this atrocity?
He ordered the massacre of all the men in the nearby village of Anilco. His soldiers carried it out, and the sources suggest the violence extended indiscriminately to women and children in the village as well.
Horrific.
And then, following his own death, his men secretly weighted his body with sand and sank it in the deep channel of the Mississippi River under the cover of night.
They hid his body to maintain this deception that he was some kind of divine, immortal being. That's pure psychological warfare.
It was a calculated effort to buy them time and allow the remaining Spanish expeditionary force to retreat safely. After this initial devastation, the region was essentially ignored by Europeans for over a century.
Until the French arrived from the north.
Exactly. Later French explorers, notably Jacques Marquette and Louis Joliet in 1673, and then Robert La Salle and Henri de Tonty in 1681, were successful in establishing trade relationships. Tonty is the most crucial figure here, establishing Arkansas Post in 1686 at a Quapaw village.
And this marked a huge historical milestone.
It really did. Arkansas Post became the first permanent European settlement in the entire Mississippi River Valley territory. Its strategic location meant it even played a small role in the American Revolutionary War.
Really?
It briefly saw the only battle of the conflict in the Arkansas Territory in 1783 when a small Spanish garrison fought off a British siege assisted by Allied Choctaw and Chickasaw forces.
Okay, now we jump forward to 1803 and the moment that completely reshaped the American map. The Louisiana Purchase.
The entire region, including Arkansas, was purchased by the United States from France, and this shift in sovereignty immediately intensified pressure on indigenous populations, setting the stage for removal and American settlement.
So when the territory of Arkansas was organized on July 4th, 1819, a massive political debate erupted over the issue of slavery.
This was the moment. This is the moment that set the state on its course toward the Civil War. During the organization process, a proposal for gradual emancipation was fiercely debated in the U.S. House of Representatives, and it failed by a single vote.
What?
The tiebreaker was cast by the Speaker of the House, Henry Clay, who, although he was personally conflicted, voted to allow slavery to expand into the new territory.
And that one vote fundamentally codified the geographical and economic split we were just talking about.
It ensured that Arkansas would organize as a slave territory. This allowed the wealthy, slave-based cotton plantation economy to become deeply entrenched in the fertile delta region of the Southeast. Meanwhile, the Northwest Highlands remained an area dominated by cash-scarce subsistence farming, where enslaved labor just wasn't economically viable. This economic divide would become the source of conflict for decades to come.
During this time, the removal of Native American tribes was aggressively accelerated.
As American settlement increased, removal policies intensified. The capital relocated from Arkansas Post to the more central location of Little Rock in 1821, reflecting the shift in population and strategic interest. The final removal of the Quapaw people from their ancestral lands was completed by 1833, pushing them into Indian Territory, which is now Oklahoma.
Arkansas was finally admitted to the Union as the 25th state and the 13th slave state on June 15, 1836. By then, the population was only about 60,000 people.
And the early years of statehood were fraught with problems. Arkansas immediately faced financial instability, which was exacerbated by a major state banking scandal and the nationwide economic turmoil of the Panic of 1837. This lack of financial bedrock contributed to a challenging and highly sectionalized political environment leading into the 1850s.
Let's discuss the Civil War. By 1860, what was the scale of the state's investment in the institution of slavery?
The investment was massive, particularly for the powerful Delta planters. By 1860, there were 111,115 African Americans enslaved, and that represented over 25% of the state's total population.
Wow, 1 in 4.
1 in 4.
Arkansas initially resisted secession but was pushed to join the Confederacy after Abraham Lincoln called for troops to suppress the rebellion.
That call for troops was the final straw. Arkansas seceded on May 6, 1861. The state held a crucial strategic position, defending the vital Mississippi River corridor and acting as a gateway to the West. Early battles, like the Battle of Pea Ridge in the rugged Northwest, were crucial in establishing control.
However, the Confederate grip on the state eventually faltered.
It did. The Union captured Little Rock in September of 1863. This forced the Confederate state capital to shift, first to Hot Springs and then to Washington, Arkansas, for the remainder of the war. Popular support for the Confederacy waned significantly as the conflict dragged on, driven by the unpopularity of the Confederate draft, high wartime taxes, and the imposition of martial law.
Following the war, Reconstruction began, led by the Republican-controlled legislature, and it ushered in this brief but dramatic period of reform.
Arkansas was restored to the Union in June 1868. The Republican government, which was backed by federal power, established universal male suffrage, a revolutionary change, and implemented the first public education system for both black and white children.
And this led to intense opposition.
Intense opposition from former Confederates and organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, who used violence to suppress the newly enfranchised African American vote.
This intense political upheaval culminated in a moment of near civil war within the state itself, known as the Brooks-Baxter War. We need to elaborate on this because it really signifies the violent end of Reconstruction in Arkansas.
The Brooks-Baxter War in 1874 was a political struggle that escalated into a small-scale constitutional crisis and armed conflict right in Little Rock. It began as a dispute over the results of the 1872 gubernatorial election between two Republican factions, the Brindletails, led by Joseph Brooks, and the Minsters, led by Elisha Baxter.
How does a political squabble become an actual war?
Brooks, claiming he was the rightful governor, seized the State House with armed supporters. Baxter refused to vacate, and his supporters mobilized. For weeks, the city of Little Rock was a battleground, with opposing militias constructing barricades and exchanging fire. It was chaos.
That is the collapse of Reconstruction in action.
And President Ulysses S. Grant had to intervene directly. He ordered Brooks and his militant supporters to disperse. The resulting settlement led to a new state constitution in 1874. This new document immediately re-enfranchised former Confederates who had been temporarily barred from voting, and it effectively ended Reconstruction.
And guaranteed the return of the Democratic Party to power for nearly a century.
Nearly a century.
So, with the Democrats back in control, we see the immediate rise of Jim Crow laws, designed specifically to cement white political power and suppress the black vote that had been achieved during Reconstruction.
The transition was swift and was very deliberate. Throughout the late 1880s and 1890s, when an agricultural depression threatened Democratic control, they actively worked to disenfranchise black residents and poor whites who might organize against them.
How? What were the mechanisms?
It involved implementing literacy tests, which disproportionately barred those who lacked education, and amending the Constitution to require poll taxes and these complex, shifting residency requirements.
And the final mechanism of disenfranchisement was the white primary.
By 1900, the white primary system was fully expanded. Since the Democratic Party held a monopoly on state politics, that made the primary the only election that really mattered. Excluding African Americans from voting in that primary effectively locked them out of the entire political process. This created a Democratic one-party state that resisted change until federal intervention in the 1960s.
The violence inherent in the system reached a horrifying peak in 1919 with the Elaine Massacre. We need to understand the context of what triggered this event.
The massacre occurred in the Delta region, where the plantation economy still relied heavily on the sharecropping system, which was fundamentally exploitative. Following World War I, black sharecroppers attempted to organize a union, the Progressive Farmers and Household Union of America, in Phillips County.
And they were seeking what?
They were seeking proper accounting and fair payment for their cotton crops from the white landowners.
So this attempt at economic autonomy was met with overwhelming state-sanctioned violence.
An initial confrontation resulted in the death of a white deputy, and this served as the catalyst for massive retaliation. White mobs from Arkansas and neighboring Mississippi rushed into the area with the explicit goal of suppressing the Union organizing effort and terrorizing the black population.
And the resulting death toll was staggering.
Estimates suggest that 237 black residents were killed, along with 5 white residents. The violence became so widespread and so uncontrollable that Governor Charles Hillman Brough was forced to request federal troops.
You had to call in the army.
President Woodrow Wilson approved it, and they sent troops to intervene and halt the white mobs. The event starkly illustrates the depth of resistance to black economic and political organization in the Delta region during the Jim Crow era.
And adding another layer to the state's complex wartime history, during WWII, Arkansas housed Japanese-American internment camps.
Yes. Nearly 16,000 Japanese Americans were forcibly removed from the West Coast and incarcerated in the Arkansas Delta. 2 major camps operated. The Rower Camp, which held a peak of 8,475 prisoners until 1945, and the Jerome War Relocation Center, which held about 8,000 before its closure in 1944. It's a crucial, sobering footnote in the history of civil liberties in Arkansas and the nation.
Finally, we reach the major flashpoint of the civil rights movement, the moment Arkansas received unprecedented national attention, the Little Rock Nine in 1957.
This followed the landmark Brown v. Board of Education ruling. Little Rock Central High School was slated for integration, but Governor Orville Faubus dramatically intervened. He ordered the Arkansas National Guard to physically block the 9 African-American students, the Little Rock Nine, from entering the school. This was a direct, televised act of massive resistance against a federal court order.
And the response from the federal government, led by President Eisenhower, was equally dramatic.
Eisenhower was forced to nationalize the Arkansas National Guard and deploy 1,000 active-duty troops from the 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock. These heavily armed federal soldiers were required to escort and protect the students as they entered the school on September 25, 1957. It was an unprecedented use of federal military power to enforce a domestic civil rights ruling.
And the governor's final act of defiance was to shut down the system entirely.
Correct. In a retaliatory measure, the city and the governor closed all Little Rock high schools for the remainder of the school year. Full integration of the city's schools was not achieved until the fall of 1959. This chapter really solidified Arkansas's place as a central, deeply conflicted battleground in the national fight for civil rights. The historical reliance on low-wage, commodity crop agriculture defined the first century of Arkansas's economy. However, the post-World War II era brought about a necessary diversification, moving away from that dangerous over-reliance on cotton and timber.
And today, the state's economic portfolio is vastly different. What are the current pillars?
The economy now is a highly diversified mix of service industries, specialized manufacturing, like aircraft and steel, tourism, and agriculture. Key commodity crops remain nationally important. Arkansas is the nation's largest producer of rice, broilers, which are chickens, and turkeys. But they are no longer the single dominating force they once were.
And we cannot discuss the modern Arkansas economy without talking about the Walmart phenomenon. This is the ultimate corporate paradox, where the natural state is the base for this immense global power.
It really is. Arkansas is home to 6 Fortune 500 companies, most famously Walmart, which remains the world's largest company by revenue. Its headquarters in Bentonville, in the historically rural Northwest Highlands, completely anchors and defines the state's modern economic identity.
This creates an interesting cultural fiction, doesn't it? I mean, you have this rugged, traditional Ozark identity suddenly infused with the culture and influx of a global corporate headquarters. How has that tension played out?
It creates a fascinating schism. Northwest Arkansas, the Fayetteville-Springdale-Rogers metropolitan area, is experiencing exponential growth and rapidly diversifying demographics because of the influx of high-level corporate jobs and support services.
Right.
And this contrasts sharply with the slower economic pace and persistent poverty often found in the historical Delta region. The entire Northwest quadrant is essentially an economic engine that's distinct from the rest of the state.
So if Arkansas has so many corporate giants, why do the economic rankings often place it so low nationally?
That is the core economic paradox. Arkansas is lauded for having the second lowest cost of doing business and the 5th lowest cost of living in the nation, which makes it extremely affordable. But it ranks 46th in per capita personal income and 47th in median household income.
What specific industries contribute to this low wage base, and how does that historical reliance on low-wage agriculture still shape its structure?
Well, the historical low-wage structure of agriculture and manufacturing, particularly things like poultry processing and lumber, has proven very difficult to overcome. So while Bentonville generates immense wealth, the state average is dragged down by a large proportion of service sector jobs, and that continued reliance on those lower-wage manufacturing and commodity agriculture sectors across the central and eastern regions. The low cost of living is often a result of low wages, not just low taxes.
Okay, let's look at the demographics. The state population is currently estimated at just over 3 million residents. We noted a speed bump in population growth mid-century.
A big one. After doubling consistently every decade following statehood, Arkansas recorded outright population losses in both the 1950 and 1960 censuses.
Wow, a loss.
Yes, outmigration. And it was a direct consequence of two linked events. The rapid mechanization of farming after World War II, which drastically reduced the demand for agricultural labor, and the lack of high-paying non-farming industries, which caused young, educated people to leave the state for better opportunities elsewhere.
The state has only seen consistent positive growth since the 1970s. How is the population distributed racially today, and how does that reflect the historical geography we've been talking about?
The non-Hispanic white population is about 72.0%, and the Black or African-American population is 15.4%. Crucially, the African-American population is heavily concentrated in the southern and eastern parts of the state, specifically the Delta region and cities like Pine Bluff. This concentration is a direct, enduring legacy of the plantation economy and slavery.
And when residents describe their ancestry, we see an interesting phenomenon related to American identity.
We do. The principal ancestries include African-American, Irish, German, and English, but a very large number of residents identify their ancestry simply as American.
Just American.
And the sources suggest these are families of deep English or Scots-Irish descent, whose families have been rooted in the area since before statehood, often migrating west from the original 13 colonies. They have, in a sense, internalized their identity as simply American, sometimes having lost the specificity of their European roots over centuries.
The fastest growing areas mirror the economic shift. So Northwest Arkansas is rapidly expanding.
That's the growth engine. It's fueled by the presence of Walmart, Tyson Foods, and the expanding University of Arkansas system in Fayetteville. Little Rock remains the largest metropolitan area, but Northwest Arkansas is where the vast majority of new population and business investment is flowing.
Shifting to culture, Arkansas is an integral part of the Bible Belt.
It's deeply conservative socially and religiously. The state is predominantly Christian, about 79% in 2014, dominated by evangelicals. The Southern Baptist Convention is the largest single denomination, claiming over 660,000 adherents.
This strong social conservatism plays a vital role in its political landscape. But let's tackle the enduring cultural baggage, the hillbilly stereotype.
The reputation goes way back to early colonial characterizations of the rugged, unsettled wilderness. The most enduring icon of this is the Arkansas Traveler, which was a popular folk tale and tune from the 1840s.
And that tale was meant to illustrate the socio-economic divide, wasn't it? Not just a simple northerner versus backwoods caricature.
Absolutely. Originally, the Arkansas Traveler represented the clash between the sophisticated, wealthy, often slave-owning southeastern planters and the poor, cash-scarce subsistence farmers of the northwestern hill country. The wealthy used this image to reinforce their own political and cultural dominance, painting the hill farmers as uneducated and unsophisticated.
I see.
But over time, the story was simplified and twisted in national pop culture to simply depict any Arkansan as a backwoods bumpkin, which solidified this negative classist stereotype.
Despite these struggles, the state has a rich artistic and musical heritage.
It does. Arkansas has diverse native music traditions, ranging from the profound blues heritage rooted in places like West Memphis and Helena, to rockabilly, bluegrass, and traditional folk music that's preserved and celebrated in the Ozarks, for instance, at the Ozark Folk Festival. Culturally, the Crystal Bridges Museum of American Art in Bentonville is a massive achievement.
A huge deal.
It's quickly established itself as a major national institution and a testament to the new cultural investment in the state.
Finally, let's look at health and education, where the state faces clear challenges but also achieved some notable progress.
Arkansas consistently struggles with poor health outcomes. It frequently ranks as one of the least healthy states nationally, grappling with high rates of obesity, smoking, sedentary lifestyles, and all the associated cardiovascular issues and infant mortality rates that come with that.
But there was a striking moment of progress immediately following the implementation of the Affordable Care Act.
That is the surprising fact here. Arkansas actually made the most immediate progress in the entire nation in reducing the number of uninsured residents. The rate dropped dramatically from 22.5% in 2013 to just 12.4% in 2014.
Wow.
It showed that when structural policy changes were adopted, the state was capable of making rapid gains in public health access.
In education, we know the University of Arkansas system and the Arkansas State University system are the major hubs. But one final detail regarding school discipline is quite remarkable.
It is a sobering reflection on disciplinary policy. Corporal punishment is still legally practiced in Arkansas public schools. And the data shows that the rate of corporal punishment administered in the state is higher than every other state except Mississippi, which indicates a stark difference in disciplinary approaches compared to most of the rest of the nation.
So Arkansas operates under the standard three-branch structure of government. The executive officers, including the governor, serve four-year terms and are limited to two full terms.
And a unique aspect of the executive branch is that the governor and the lieutenant governor are elected separately. This means they can potentially be from different political parties, which can lead to some interesting dynamics or political friction within the executive branch itself.
Now let's discuss the political environment, which has undergone a massive, rapid transformation. Arkansas was historically Democratic one-party state for decades after Reconstruction.
For well over a century, Arkansas was part of the Solid South, voting reliably Democratic in state and local elections. But this all changed dramatically in 2012. In those elections, Republicans gained control of both the state Senate and the House of Representatives.
And that marked the first time the Republican Party had controlled either chamber since 1874. I mean, this was a political earthquake, and it arrived late compared to its neighboring southern states.
It was very late. Arkansas was, in fact, the last state of the old Confederacy to switch legislative control to the Republican Party. This established Republican dominance, and today the entire congressional delegation, both U.S. senators and all four U.S. House seats, is held by Republicans. It's a comprehensive political flip from the historical Democratic stronghold.
Of course, the state's most famous modern political export is Bill Clinton.
Right. Bill Clinton, a former Arkansas governor, brought immense national attention to the state before his successful 1992 presidential bid. He positioned himself as a new Democrat, someone capable of winning in the South while appealing to moderates nationally. And his background as a state governor provided him with the executive experience he needed to successfully pivot onto the national stage.
Given the state's large evangelical population, social conservatism is a dominant factor in state policy.
It is a defining characteristic. Reflecting this, following the Dobbs v. Jackson Supreme Court decision, abortion is now banned in Arkansas. Furthermore, in 2004, voters passed a ban on same-sex marriage with 75% approval, though this ban is currently inactive due to the federal Obergefell v. Hodges ruling.
And the death penalty.
Arkansas retains the death penalty, authorizing various methods, including the electric chair.
Finally, we turn to military presence and infrastructure. Little Rock Air Force Base housed a critical Cold War facility.
Indeed, the base housed the Strategic Air Command Facility, which operated the Titan II intercontinental ballistic missiles. And this brings us to one of the most serious and terrifying nuclear near disasters in U.S. history, the 1980 explosion of a Titan II ICBM silo in Damascus, Arkansas.
This incident is often forgotten nationally, but it was massive in scale. What exactly happened in Damascus?
Well, the Titan II was the most powerful operational U.S. ballistic missile at the time. It carried a massive 9-megaton nuclear warhead. On the evening of September 18, 1980, a routine maintenance operation went catastrophically wrong. A technician accidentally dropped a heavy wrench socket, which fell approximately 70 feet down the silo and punctured the thin metal skin of the missile's first stage.
And that punctured skin led to a fuel leak.
It did. The missile used this highly volatile hypergolic liquid propellant, meaning the fuel spontaneously ignites when it mixes with the oxidizer. The resulting leak led to an explosion just hours later that blew the 740-ton silo door off the top and hurled the missile parts and the nuclear warhead hundreds of feet into the air.
That must have triggered mass panic and evacuations.
The initial explosion was equivalent to a small earthquake. A massive evacuation zone was quickly established around Damascus. The crucial, terrifying fact is that the 9-megaton warhead, despite being thrown a quarter mile away, landed safely without detonating because of the built-in safety mechanisms.
That is a close call.
The entire incident forced a massive national review of the safety protocols and design of the entire Titan II ICBM program, and it ultimately contributed to its decommissioning.
That is a staggering piece of Cold War history rooted right there in the Arkansas interior. Turning now to transportation, mobility is key for commerce, particularly with the state's role as a trucking hub.
The state maintains the 13th largest state highway system in the nation. Key corridors like I-40 are absolutely vital, The section running through Little Rock is noted as the nation's third busiest trucking corridor. Freight mobility across the state, linking the East Coast to the West, is a primary economic driver.
And the rail system remains very significant for corporate freight.
It is. Arkansas is served by over 2,700 miles of railroad track and 3 Class I railroads. Passenger service is still available via Amtrak's Texas Eagle, which stops at 5 stations across the state, including Little Rock and Texarkana. And of course, we must reiterate the critical role of the McClellan-Kerr Arkansas River navigation system in facilitating heavy, bulk goods transport that feeds into these rail and road corridors. #outro.
We've covered a tremendous amount of ground in this deep dive. I mean, moving from the legal battle over the Silent S in 1881 all the way to the immense corporate power housed in Bentonville today.
The core of Arkansas's identity is its relentless, enduring dichotomy. It's the rugged, cash-scarce interior highlands versus the fertile, historically wealthy, and troubled lowlands of the Delta. This geographical split dictated the state's entire political and social path. It drove the conflict over slavery, the intensity of the Civil War, and the national crisis during the Little Rock Nine integration.
And yet, the modern state has successfully transitioned. It relies on these global commerce giants like Walmart, making it a state of unexpected corporate power, all while projecting that nostalgic, appealing identity as the natural state.
And that nickname truly fits because of the sheer scope of public access to unique natural attractions. As a quick synthesis, here's a checklist of why that nickname holds up.
You have the one-of-a-kind, publicly accessible crater of Diamond State Park,
Right.
the thermal therapeutic waters of Hot Springs National Park, the underground wonders of Blanchard Springs Caverns, and the preserved wild beauty of the Buffalo National River.
The history is as rich and complex as the land itself, full of contradictions and struggles. And that leads us to our final provocative thought for you to consider. Arkansas spent decades legislatively fighting over its own identity, from that 1881 pronunciation mandate to the efforts to erase the hillbilly stereotype. Given its central role in both the brutal legacy of the Delta plantation economy and the crucial victory for integration represented by the Little Rock Nine, how does a state successfully reconcile and unify these profoundly polarized historical moments? What parts of Arkansas's violent Cold War past, whether the classist structure of Delta or the stark reality of the 1980 Titan II nuclear missile explosion, have been quietly subsumed or maybe even actively erased by the powerful contemporary narrative that's focused exclusively on corporate headquarters, natural recreation, and the promise of a new Democrat future? This is a history well worth digging into further.